And here we are live, Kicking the Seat Wednesday live stream. We're not just doing a Wednesday live stream this week, we're doing a double feature, titling it Hell and Glamnation, because Earth's Mightiest critics are here to talk about two genre films. I mean, yeah, I guess you call them both genre films, different genres to be sure, but kind of award season buzzy dramas. One is a body horror that is getting a lot of attention this year, and I hadn't seen either of them until just a few days ago. We are, of course, talking about The Substance and ANORA. So joining me tonight are, as I mentioned, Earth's Mightiest critics. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree. We have Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists. We have Annie Banks of The Mary Sue and We Got This Covered, and Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of the Spoiler Room podcast, and also of I'm not sure if I want to be on this panel because I might be alone. Mark, you're not going to be alone. You're not going to be alone. I will admit that I had my reservations about both movies. I think partially due to the hype. We're in awards season, and even in the months leading up to it. Oh, wait, hold on a second. And here she comes. Here she comes, skating in at the very last minute.
Woo!
Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front. How you doing, Katie?
I am doing awesome.
All right. Well, we had just done our introductions, and now I've introduced you. So I was mentioning that I wasn't. I'd heard a lot of buzz about both ANORA and The Substance leading up to this show. Some people on this panel may have called it one of their best films of the year, or one of their top films. So we'll get into all of that. And I wasn't quite sure because I'd seen the trailer. I read some things about them. Like I don't know. I just don't quite get it. Then I watched the films. And in one case, I wasn't completely turned around, but I liked it better than I thought I would. The other case, I still don't get it. I don't get the hype. So which of those films am I talking about? And in which order will we discuss them? I'm going to leave that up to the panel. Who's excited to talk about ANORA first? Jeff, you raised your hand. That counts. So, Jeff, you raised your hand, which means you get to synopsize ANORA.
Well, it's not an easy film to describe. It might have an elevator pitch that seems fairly straightforward, but the movie zigs and zags quite a bit from that. As the film goes on, it becomes many different films in a way, and sort of a melding of different kinds of narratives. But it basically starts with a young woman named Annie McKeeva, who is a sex worker. She is in Brighton Beach, and she's pretty savvy and pretty kind of tough talking and knows the game and knows how to charm men out of lots of bills to do her craft. And one night she is asked to entertain a group of men who speak Russian, and they needed somebody who can talk Russian because their English isn't very good. And so she meets with them and entertains them for the evening, and sort of hits it off with this young man named Vanya, who is the rather immature son of a wealthy oligarch. And he doesn't really present himself as entirely honest to Annie about his life, but they start a relationship, and pretty soon he's paying her to come home with them. And it becomes sort of this romance and sort of this relationship. It almost seems like a rom-com at first. But then they go to Vegas and they get married, and I'm not giving away a lot. This is all in the first half hour of the movie. And then it just kind of becomes this crazy film from there, and I think defies expectations. Not only in the way it's plotted, it doesn't turn into this sort of sweet love story, Romeo and Juliet in our modern sex worker era, but it turns into not only sort of a vendetta film, a vicious film, a mean film, but it also turns into a chase film, and it turns into a really elaborate sort of character study with a number of these characters who you think are just brutal thugs representing the Russian oligarch who are sent there to apply maximum harm. They become sort of sympathetic, and it almost becomes a farce as they chase about trying to figure out what's going on, where Vanya has run off to. And ultimately, by the end, I think it's a very touching film as well. We get to know all these characters and their sort of sad lives, and they're trying, even though they're in these weird situations and less than noble professions on a certain level. but it's quite. I think for me, what I liked so much about it, if I dare just say quickly, is all more for what it doesn't do than what it does. When you hear a movie about this kind of situation, you think it's going to be, oh, the love will conquer all, or somehow this, tough cookie will sort of turn the tables on these people, or maybe even, oh, it's a mob film. Somebody's going to get killed, and it's going to be awful, and there's going to be violence and bloodshed and all that. And it doesn't go any of those places. Instead, it goes into places where you find yourself getting to know what you just thought were kind of, stock henchmen and stuff. It's running around in the cold, which makes it funny and sort of sad at the same time. And, I think all these people are kind of fooling themselves about what they're doing, and even, the Annie character, she's not even called ANORA until the very end, when she mentions that she doesn't really like that movie, that name, but I think it's called that because I think it represents the maturity that her character comes to some sort of self-awareness better than she had originally, and some knowledge about herself that maybe is a little bit more of a mature person, the name she was given, as opposed to the cute Annie name that makes her accessible to these horny men. But it's by Sean Baker, who wrote and directed it, and he always sort of zigs when you don't expect him to, and tells very unusual character studies and stories about people who most of us don't know, or most of us wouldn't really consider knowing or come in contact with, and yet they become accessible, they become interesting, and they become, I think, very empathetic and sympathetic.
Yeah, I mean,
how's that? Was that okay?
Very well summarized. You got the summary in there, and also your high-level thought. So I think that
Sure.
that was very well stated.
Oh, well, thank you.
And the thing is, like, I mostly agree, and I think my problem is with, and it's a problem I have with both these movies, and it's a problem I had with Wicked, is I think all three of these films are very well acted. The production values are great. I like the story mechanics. I just have a fundamental problem with sort of some of the screenplay issues and the characters. Nora or Annie. I feel weird calling her Annie because we've got Annie Banks on the show.
I know.
So I don't be like, Annie.
Let's call her ANORA.
Like, no.
Yeah. We'll call her ANORA. That's the name of the film too.
Yes. But she has that moment of true vulnerability at the very end of the movie, and to me, it's kind of like, it's like how people worship the movie Scarface, and they talk about what a glamorous lifestyle Tony Montana had, with all the coke and the money and the women. And then at the very end, it turns into a morality movie. It's like, nope, see, he got it in the end. Don't do drugs. I kind of felt that way. I'm like, in the last 30 seconds when she breaks down crying and clawing at the one guy who kind of showed her some real affection, like, unless there's a part two, I can't wipe away the obnoxiousness, the outright idiocy of a lot of stuff I saw in the I think she's a very, in some ways, realistically portrayed character. Mikey Madison puts a lot into ANORA, and I appreciate that, but just I kept waiting to latch on to the main character. Once the movie gets more populated, like with these Russian and Armenian kind of henchmen, these minders of Vanya, who up and just leaves. I think it gets more interesting, especially with Igor. I think he's the real centerpiece of this movie. That's about a different character, and I liked their kind of interaction and what we learn about him. I wish we just dug a little bit deeper on the main character of our ANORA. So those are my thoughts. Let's toss it to Mark.
No, they'll get the others first. You made that mine.
Okay, all right.
You made that lot lead off with me.
All right. Well, Annie, talk about Annie.
Annie, talk about Annie. Oh boy. A little weird hearing my name in a different context. But I think I'm in the same boat where I heard so much about the movie, and I had really exceedingly high expectations just because of the praise it was getting, and especially folks who are in the industry who work as sex workers. They were able to screen this in advance and were just incredibly complimentary. And I left like, okay, you know, I think there are a lot of working parts and strong mechanics that can resonate with a certain audience. I think that this might be a divisive pick due to the themes, especially now when you are relying on some Russian stereotypes, I suppose, and you're looking to the superficiality aspects of sex work and then trying to go below that surface level where it might not resonate with everyone. I think it was daring. I think it was unique. I think it was interesting. I liked it. It was simply okay for me. And I think it's a great conversation starter, but something that I don't really see myself going back to revisit anytime soon. I think this is going to cause a lot of buzz for awards. I think it's, you know, when it doesn't get nominated or does get nominated and doesn't win, there's going to be a lot of upset. And then I think in another 5 years, people are going to go, hey, remember ANORA? And then that kind of fades away.
Let me ask you about that, because I mentioned, you know, at the top that these are kind of awards season,
Yeah.
like they're in the conversation, but both of these are very niche kind of movies. I mean, I know ANORA is playing like at the Skokie AMC, or it was a couple of weeks ago, so it's got some kind of a mainstream recognition, but
Right.
I don't know if I'm not really sure what movies are breaking through this season aside from Wicked, because it's been a very strange year. So you mentioned people are going to be kind of upset. Are these like Hollywood people or the agents representing the people in this movie? I just don't see this having the same kind of like, oh, is it going to be La La Land or Moonlight kind of conversation?
I would say if it is held on the pedestal where it is celebrated in online film communities, I see this being really big on Twitter. I see it really big on Letterboxd, where folks who consider themselves to be self-declared cinephiles, AMC stubs, A-lister members, those folks who spend a lot of time at the movie theaters and not outside touching grass, they will be the most upset. And at the same time, I really do applaud ANORA for opening the conversation and engaging people who may not be in the audience to go out and explore this movie. But I don't think that anyone that's planning on seeing Mufasa or Sonic or Lord of the Rings is going to be too heartbroken if this does not take home Best Original Screenplay. I think it definitely comes down to personality as well. This screams film school major to me. Respectfully, you know, and also, you know, at the same time, it shines light on a minority of employed people who are faced with stigmatism. So it really goes back and forth. I think the conversation depends on personal experience and personal prejudice.
Well, I mean, you're not going to get me to side with the sex workers, but you know, in any capacity. But I do understand what you're saying, and I think that one of the things I kind of wish this movie had done, especially at, you know, just about 2.5 hours, and it's the same kind of complaint I had with The Substance, is to go a bit deeper. Because honestly, and Mark, you and I'm not going to pick on you yet. I'm saving you for last, and we will get to the rest of the panel, I promise. But I blame you for a lot of the issues that I had that popped up in my head because of this film, because of your damn show. We talked about Showgirls a few months ago, and damn it, I kept seeing the Showgirls parallels in this movie, down to the whole cliche about, oh, I'm a stripper and I got a better opportunity, so now I'm going to leave. And there's this tearful goodbye, but there's this one girl who she's not having it. And the manager's kind of a scumbag, but he's also kind of a father figure. I'm like, is this all that these stories are? Because if you're, Annie, to your point, if you're talking about a community that is not, you know, talked about or represented, given the movies that come out about them, I can kind of understand why, because I'm starting to wonder, well, maybe we've just seen their story and we're kind of past it. I don't want to believe that's true, but watching this movie, I'm like, I didn't get anything new about that world. Now, what I'll call the henchman raid on the strip club towards the end of the film, I thought was pretty spectacular, but that's a set piece and not you know, a character study. Katie, jump in here.
So I'm going to disagree with what you were saying about, I forget who was saying it, but Sean Baker, I think, does an excellent job of showing different lives of sex workers. And as Annie said, these are people who, I mean, this is work, whether people like it or not, this is work. But the thing is, sex workers are like cast aside, and when crimes happen to them, when things happen to them at work or out of work, they're disregarded. And I think he's trying to show people who do this as people. Like, and one of the things with Annie, and I think this also with ANORA, and I think this also goes with the substance, is that when she can own what she's doing. She knows what she's doing. She, even if it, to us, it may seem like a little bit naive, that the whole thing with Vanya is going to end up being a happy ending or whatever and all that stuff. But it's when his mother comes in and starts calling her a whore and stuff like that. And it's like, it's the disrespect that she is like, you know what? Screw this, screw your coat, screw this. I know who I am. I know what this was. And that's one of the things I think it like is a nice synergy with the substance, because it's all about respect. I know with the substance, some people think it's jealousy between two women. It's like, it's not. It's about respect and disrespect. And with Annie, she's disrespected when the mom comes in. Like, I love that the oligarch, when Annie's like going off on the mom and he just starts laughing, because I can see his face and him thinking like, this is all the stuff that I want to tell to my wife and stuff, but she runs the house. And I mean, I love that it's like the cat and mouse game. I love that he it's a bit of, I mean, Showgirls meets Pretty Woman. They have the little Pretty Woman things in there, which are cute, but I do not think it is Pretty Woman, and I hope no one actually thinks it's Pretty Woman, but it's definitely, they have those cute little drops of Pretty Woman that I like. I think Mikey Madison does a great job. It is not easy to do that stuff in heels, guys. Let me tell you. I mean, that takes skill, that takes work. Everybody, and my friend of mine actually told me that he asked me if I saw this movie, and I was like, I haven't yet. He's like, yeah, I made the mistake of going to this film and didn't really look into it. And I went with my aunts and dad and uncles, and they weren't really happy. I'm like, oh, okay. From what I know, that's not the, and then when I watched the opening scene, I'm like, oh, damn. Yeah, I need to call him because this is not good. I mean,
well,
look,
did they stay through the whole movie though, or were there walkouts?
No, the two aunts walked out, which, like, come on.
But the guys stayed. They're like, I can't believe I'm watching this film for 2.5 hours.
I mean, apparently they were, which it's like, ladies, we've all got it. We all have this.
They haven't watched much television or movies for the last 40 years, have they?
I mean, I don't know.
If they think this is shocking, they should turn on HBO any night of the last 40 years. Those kind of people aren't even worth worrying about, because they just aren't going to be convinced of anything if they're that naive.
Well, I could drop a name, but I'm not going to tell you who one of the uncles is. But it's interesting that, I don't know, I got off topic, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just about respect. And I like the fact that, I don't know, it's always going to be that thing with me with the film, though, that it's like looking farther into it, and the more, especially with the outrage of the parents, I understand, like, you know, the family has tons of money, but it's also one of those things that they don't, I mean, he says he's 21. Which I don't believe. And, I don't think we need to have it explained to us. I don't think we need to, like, know that he's probably actually a child and not 21 years old. I mean, look, yeah, is he getting into clubs? Is he doing this? Is he doing that? Sure, you could do a lot of that when you've got Benjamins behind you. It doesn't matter. It's like you can be, when you have that, you're 100 years old, because that money's going to talk. And that kind of got me into a little bit of like Licorice Pizza. I mean, I don't think he's 15 by any means or anything like that, but it always made me wonder, like, how, I don't know, his behavior, he is extremely immature. There's different things about what he does with her that made me think it's not necessarily just the money that the parents are worried about, but it's like, this is actually a child. But at the same time, I don't think that was, maybe that's not the point and all that stuff. But I don't know. I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of people who are saying this is going to be nominated for Best Picture. I could maybe see that. I mean, I love Florida Project. I think Willem Dafoe was robbed of an Oscar for that, for Best Supporting Actor. Tangerine was one of my favorite films of the year. This, I don't think, is up to that level of those stories and necessarily those performances. I do think Mikey Madison did an excellent job. And I mean, I gotta give it to Igor, him having like maybe 20 lines in the film. His eyes said so much that really made me feel like I did a deep dive on that guy, like watching him just watch her and just seeing, it's like, he knew, it's like, this isn't the respect that she deserves. Like, she kicked our ass. She can handle herself, and it's not what, I mean, she signed up for. Like, she, Vanya was the one who proposed to her. It's not like she like tried to twist it or anything like that. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting film. I am actually watching it for the second time before we were getting on. Before we got on, I don't know regarding like awards and all that stuff. I can see what Annie was saying, that I think a lot of people are going to be upset if it's not. I think it is going to get nominated for so much because of, the Palme d'Or. I mean, Neon's killing it, by the way, with that, everybody. That's why I wore my shirt, which...
Well, yeah, they're the kind of the new A24. They're sort of duking it out for that title of indie label supremacy. No, I mean, like, here's the thing. When the mom, the wife of the Russian oligarch comes in and starts, berating ANORA and calling her a whore, I'm like, and she's getting all upset. I'm like, I don't understand where the lie is, because she is literally a prostitute. And I can understand if mom doesn't want Junior, especially if he's heir to this fortune, has all these responsibilities, getting married to someone whose job it is to sleep with people for money. Who knows how long she's been doing this, what she has, what it does to her head. You can make that case for ANORA and working that stuff out with her. But as far as like the concerned parent, I'm on side with her. One of the issues I have with Annie as the character is that it's not even naivete. It's almost like a screenwriter irresponsibility, because when Vanya and she are like on the couch after one of their early encounters, he's like, yeah, my parents are loaded, and says who his dad is, and she's like, I don't know who that is, and he's like, Google him. So he Googles him. I don't think they actually say what they do or what the parents are, but she's like, holy shit. So she sees at least the wealth, but let's just assume he's some kind of an international Russian business magnate or part of the Russian mafia or something. When the henchmen show up to the house and they come in, they're like, this isn't your house, he's coming with us, all this other stuff. She's like, no, you aren't. This is my husband. I'm his wife. This is my place now. I'm like, it reminded me of, going back to you again, Mark, Touch of Evil, which you talked about a few weeks ago, when Janet Leigh gets confronted by that gang of Mexican criminals, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna mess you up because we don't like what your husband's doing. She's like, you're not gonna touch me. I'm like, you gotta kind of know where you are. You're alone. You're surrounded by these murderous thugs, and that's not the time. That's the time for diplomacy and getting the hell out of there. The lack of self-awareness kind of bugged the crap out of me. Those few touches aside, I thought she was rather charming. Mike Crowley, we're going to get around this round table if it kills me.
Right.
What did you make of ANORA?
It's funny. I watched it a few days ago, and I personally loved it, but I do have some issues with it. One is that Sean Baker writes these very realistic characters, and he very empathetically he very realistically betrays these people, but they can be insufferable to listen to for 2 hours, because half of Annie's dialogue is like, fuck you, motherfucker, this and that, and that's like literally half what she says throughout the whole film. But the thing is, he's not judging her for being a sex worker. As you see as the film progresses, she's able to stand her own against that huge oligarch family, and and as you guys said, she's able to handle herself. And the movie felt like a thriller, but it felt like a spiraling, sort of horrible day to have. It's just a downward spiral of cataclysmic events that ends up forming a plot that is kind of shallow when you think about it. Like a lot of people have kind of made the same plot, like, okay, this girl is fall in love with this guy who has a lot of money and blah 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 blah, and it doesn't work out. But I kind of like the way it was played in this film, where I can't tell if they're doing improv with the dialogue or if that's really in the script, and it kind of adds a sense of realism to Baker's films. Because like people are saying, well, like you guys are saying, oh, this has great production value. It's like, no, the production value in this movie was pretty low. I mean, especially considering the amount of like lens flares they had because they were pointing the lens directly towards the sun. I mean, you could say it was intentional, but I swear, at one point when I was watching the movie, they were like driving around in a car, and it was like around sundown, and then in the next shot, the sun's completely down. Like it was a complete Ed Wood shot, and I couldn't believe I saw that in the movie. And for someone who likes to make movies on a low budget and likes to sort of explore people as human beings, also giving an honest portrayal of them, because there's nothing about Annie that makes you go, oh, she has this quality, that quality, because we don't really know much about her in the beginning. What we do know in the end is that she is a fully capable person, but as the final scene kind of shows, which might have been a little much, I'm on the fence about it, that she sort of comes to terms with what her life is going to be, and there's really no turning back. She's going to be stuck with this. Well, I don't want to give away the ending, but yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Well, there's spoilers at the bottom. You're more than
yeah.
Well, so I'm curious. What do you think her life is going to be in that last scene? Do you think she's going to end up with Igor or by herself?
I think she and Igor will get together and they'll end up breaking up, and then she'll just go from guy to guy and then end up dying in some studio apartment.
Wow.
Is that how you feel about all women, Mike, or just
no?
Look out!
No. Just her case. She doesn't. If she could pull herself out of doing stripper work and all that, then great. Because I liked her character. I liked her. I mean, she was insufferable in some ways, but I still liked her because she was portrayed as like a human being in this situation. But yeah, I mean, you can't honestly see a bright future for her, but maybe she, I mean, I hope she has one, but realistically, like in my head, I just feel like, how do you find something when on your job application it said that you were a hooker or whatever she was?
Well, I really don't think she's going to put that she was a hooker.
Right.
Yeah. Like when you land your next job as a hiring manager and you have someone like at the top of the resume say hooker, give me a call. I'd love to see you.
Unless it's William Shatner, who is TJ Hooker.
In all honesty, I would almost hire the person just for being very
like driving around in the hood of a car
with their role. In all honesty, I'd be like,
that's true. Yeah, very direct.
You're not You're not afraid. You're not hiding. You put it right up for. Okay, you know what? I'm going to interview you because I really want to meet the person who just puts that up there very boldly and up front and said, yeah, this is what I do.
I mean, if it was for Weinstein, you get the job, you know.
Well, we're gonna talk about Harvey in the next movie. All right. So I think that brings us to you, Mark.
Yes. Okay. For all the hype and everything that everybody's given it, and all of that, I was going into it and I was expecting a heavier film. This isn't the middle part of this film is not at all. It suddenly becomes this farce in many ways, this comical farce with our guys, where it tries to take up a lighter moment. But we're there for too long, like an SNL skit. At the beginning, I liked where this was going, and I felt bad for the ANORA character. I liked her in the beginning because of her moxie, and I liked her because her matter of factness. But there's nothing that I see in any of their scenes between her and our young man that led me at all to believe that he was serious about anything. and yet she was starting to take it serious, and it was tragic, and it felt awkward. And I don't mind feeling awkward for the main character. Okay. And her profession, it didn't bother me at all. I liked how that was portrayed, how they put it right up front. I think it needs to be at least normalized in conversation so that people feel that they're comfortable to talk about it without sitting there feeling like they need to, yes, I'm 18 or older, clicking the box. I think it's a profession out there that's been out there since the beginning of time, and I think people
so is
need to
human
be,
trafficking, Mark. I mean, come on.
well, but I think it's something that needs to be able to have a comfortable conversation, and I think that's what he's doing here, and I think he establishes that. The thing with the Anora character that I had a problem with was just when we get to the wedding part and how she is, feeling like this is serious, when there's nothing that I ever see from this young man that gives me any indication whatsoever that he's actually taking this relationship seriously, and she's taking seriously. And then when the guys show up to try to take it, annulled, I felt that part, for where they start and where they end, it takes too long to get there for me. In all honesty, the middle part where we're going back and forth and they're looking for Ivan, the young man, for me could have been cut down a bit. While I know we're learning about the henchmen and everything, it's just, for me, it went on. I liked when she confronted the mother. I'm like, okay, we're getting back into the gritty of this. We're learning a little bit more about her strength, and we're learning a little bit more about just how much of a schmuck this guy is. How much of a guy who just uses people and puts them aside because his parents are rich. That's part of the statement here. It's just how to getting there for so long. Anora, at times it felt like her dialogue was from a Facebook group, where someone was really trying not to admit they made a mistake. And I get that. She really wanted this to work. She really, in her heart of hearts, she in her heart of hearts at the beginning, she really is thinking that he cares for her. And then as they go along, and I understand the length of time, as they go along, she's realizing, wait, no, this guy doesn't give a shit about me. But maybe I could piece something together from this relationship still. The one thing I give him credit for is that I never, at the very first hint, you're like, okay, maybe she's going into this for the money, but it's very brief. And then you realize, no, she's going into this for an emotional attachment. She's going into this because she actually is caring about this. She thinks she has an opportunity to actually have a caring relationship. And as we go along, we get up bits and pieces of maybe how her family life was. I think that's most evident. And it's most evident near the end when she's having the conversation with Igor. When she's having the conversation with Igor about, why wouldn't you rape me? And it's a very serious scene. And it was like when we got to those sections from when the parents showed up in that, I was all back into this film. But in the middle part of this film, where it was kind of the Keystone Cops with our henchmen and that, it kind of took me out of it, because I was expecting for something maybe a little bit more serious or reflective. We don't get enough reflective moment pauses for myself in here. We get them brief with Anora, where she's looking out the window and we get this, but it's not enough for me for the length of time this film goes. If it gets cut down, I think I would have enjoyed it more.
I understand where you're coming from, Mark, because it is that kind of abrupt turn where it does sort of become a different movie. And it took me a while of sitting in that for like a half hour. I'm like, okay, this is just where we're going, to really appreciate what Baker was doing in this stretch of the movie, because he's dragging, just as Annie has been kidnapped and kind of dragged along in this cause to find Vanya, we can't leave either. So it's a way of putting us in that situation. We're the fifth person in that poor damaged truck. And it's tiring. You just kind of want it to be over. You're exhausted. You're tired of hearing people yell at each other and complain and make excuses. And that's exactly what they were feeling. So it's almost a relief when the Russian parents show up. You're like, okay, finally we're going to get some confrontation instead of all this just wandering around. And I think as far as Vanya goes, Annie's buyer's remorse, I think, sets in a little bit sooner than she would even want to admit, because there are a couple of scenes where, again, post-coitus, they're sitting on the couch and he's playing his Xbox and she's kind of like cuddled up to him, but the look on her face is like, am I just going to lay here while you play Call of Duty for 6 hours? What's going on here? And so when this interruption happens and these henchmen show up and they're making all these demands, she's kind of like, I'm trying to work on this. You guys go away, come back. We got business to take care of. Jeff, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, I think everybody's making very good points. Although I dare say, I don't want to sound snotty about this. I think missing a little bit of the point of the movie. I think the movie's about delusion. And that's why the movie goes on so long, because they think it's going to be done quickly. Oh, we're the muscle. We're going to come in and we're the guys who take all this. And it doesn't go fast. And I think the depth of the characters is revealed because all of their delusions are sort of picked off one by one. I don't think Annie is smart. I think she's streetwise, but I don't think she's smart. I also don't think she really believes that that's going to be the great love of her life, but I think she thinks it's a way out. And I think that she's sort of swept up by the glamour and the money. But at the end of the day, the reason she has trouble with him when he's playing Call of Duty is he's not a good guy at all. He doesn't even know how to fuck her. That's why the whole last scene is there, because finally she fucks because she wants to. And she fucks a man who knows how to fuck her back. And that's why it goes on for 5 minutes.
Let's slow down on the F-bombs because we're
sorry.
live here on YouTube.
Sorry. I'm sorry. But I mean, I think that at the very end, all the delusions had been sort of wiped away from everybody. Even, the fact that the mother thinks she's so hoity-toity. It's like, you're the wife of a Russian drug dealer, no less. You can get off your high horse too. I think they're all sort of revealed to be these vulnerable people who have bought into the delusion of what they're doing and thinking that it's going to have a better outcome than it does. One thing that I would just want to say too, that I found very funny about the movie, we've talked about it very seriously, is there was part of this movie that reminded me of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And that is that these people continually put themselves in dangerous situations for an end that they aren't going to possibly enjoy. We just know it's not going to go there. And yet, as they do, they have to face hard truths about who they really are, what their relationships are like. You'll remember that Spencer Tracy and Milton Berle's wife are the only two who kind of see what's going on, and they're very sad in it. And I think in some respects, like, Toros is kind of like a key character. Like, he rushes out of this Catholic church christening, which is such a big deal to that part of the community, to take care of this errand that he thinks is going to be done in 5 minutes, and it turns into an all-night, thing like Edie Adams and Sid Caesar stuck in the hardware store. They can't get out of them. They're 2 minutes away from the park. So I think some of that is funny, but I think at the end of the day, all the stuff that you guys are saying is kind of right. But if you understand or see it as like, well, this is about these characters who are deluding themselves, but surely over this long course of this cold evening, they're going to have to face some hard truths about their lives and who they are and what they're doing. And
I get that, but at the same time, if you've watched enough movies, you kind of see where this is going. And I understand trying to put you in the place of ANORA. I just felt that they could have done it a little bit sooner and still get their point across and get their feelings. If it isn't done sooner,
Mike, if it isn't done sooner, Mark, it's because I think it's not just about ANORA figuring out. I think it's about all of those characters, including Igor, who you'll notice that he's always in the scene. He doesn't say a lot.
Yeah.
Somebody said he only says 20 lines, but that's intentional because they're all figuring out. I think it's really an ensemble piece, even though it's entitled after the female lead.
And I liked Igor as well. It was just that, especially the middle part of this film, I really was trying to wrap my head exactly what they wanted me to feel, because we start off with the seriousness a bit. We're starting off with portraying the sex work in that and what she goes through it, and just how she you know, it's just a job for her and everything. And even when she first goes over for the first appointment with our young man and all of that, you know, it's pretty much her job in that. And I get, you know, it's like, okay, it's great. And then we get into this a little more, but then you just get this middle of the film to where I'm just like, I understand what they were trying to go for. I guess for me personally, it's nothing necessarily against them. I didn't check out, but at the same time, I was like, when are we going to get to the part where she meets the parents and then everything comes to a head and we get this, where she, you know, I'm just waiting for that moment because I could.
Didn't you think it was unpredictable? Like they go into that candy store and she's got her friends there, and then suddenly Igor is violent, and then you suddenly worry like maybe she's not going to be okay. I mean, I think there was constant expectations being sort of usurped, and I thought that kept my interest, at least for me. It did.
And there's also a bit of that, you know, that delusion theme. I like that you brought that up, Jeff, because that one bit in the candy store where Igor goes crazy with the baseball bat and starts breaking, that is completely what to us is out of character for this guy who's kind of like, you know, he does what he's contracted to do or obligated to do by, you know, restraining ANORA and gagging her and all this other stuff. And he feels kind of bad about it. He's trying to he offers her a scarf and she's like, that's the same scarf you gagged me with, you freak. But then when he goes off, he turns into this unhinged beast. Now, later on, where they're in their car and they're having that moment of tenderness at the end of the film, if, to Mike's point, if they somehow end up together, even if it's only fleetingly, that bit of delusion, is ANORA going to compartmentalize or forget what happened in that candy store, knowing that that thing is inside that sensitive, you know, loving guy? Mark, I mean, I think I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like the things that you're asking for do drive it back to convention. And whether or not Baker was trying to defy those expectations deliberately, I feel like if they had just jumped right to the thing, it would have been like, you know, every other kind of movie like this that we've seen.
I wasn't looking at them to jump directly to it, but it was just, I mean, and even you guys talk about the candy store scene where he becomes an unhinged beast. I didn't take him seriously for when he was breaking the stuff. It felt almost like he was doing that because that was expected, but at the same time, I didn't get yes, he damaged some property, but I never once bought that this guy, because we had not seen anything up until this point, even hint at it, that he was actually going to hurt these people. I never felt that. I never took these henchmen ever that seriously.
But Mark, I think you're missing the point. They are those serious henchmen, but it unravels here. Okay. And I think that was Sean Baker reminding us that Igor is brought in as the last resort muscle, the guy who's going to say, I'm not going to hesitate to cut your throat. I guess he's the one who's most sensitive through it. And to me, that's where the expectation game is usurped. And what makes the film interesting is when those three guys show up, I thought this is going to turn ugly now and somebody's going to get killed. And they never do that. Instead, it's like they're shown to be delusional, scared, frustrated, angry, bored, tired, exhausted, and 100 other things. But it's not like, you know, the usual, like the guys who show up in, you know, the Equalizer movies, those kind of Russians who are, you know, they're all just awful, evil people. When, you know, Denzel just happens to be a little smarter about how to be awful. I don't know. I think you are. I think they were those people. They were not in this situation because they're dealing with a young woman who's clearly swearing to make up to try to be tough and act tough when she isn't. And she's a young girl and she's vulnerable. And the boy, Vanya, is an idiot and he's probably 17. And, you know, they're trying to make this not be messy because they could themselves be killed if they make it too messy and end up getting Vanya killed. So I think that to me is where the surprise is in this film. When you say, I never expect him to do this. Really? I kept worrying the entire film they were going to go there. And the fact that they didn't, I think, is a testament to Baker is restrained and finding a different way to tell stories about these kind of characters we've all seen a million times.
I was not worried about them going to there as soon as you have literally the Keystone Cop running of Toros with the scarf across the living room with the light behind him.
Didn't you see? Did you see the movie Out of Sight?
Out of Sight. It's been a while.
Well, I mean, those guys were bad guys too, Don Cheadle and all that, and they're trying to kill George Clooney and Albert Brooks right up until they're tripping on stairs and blowing their own heads off. So, I mean, they can be comedic without necessarily stopping being threatening.
Yeah,
I mean, the movie
never
works.
felt them threatening.
Yeah, and it's we perceive things in different ways. I mean, I get that. I just thought, is kind of zeroing on something you were saying, Jeff, and panel, keep me honest here. I don't think we see a gun anywhere in this movie, do we?
No.
No, it's all intimidation, and the one thing I thought was kind of strange was I believe Igor bounds ANORA's hands with a telephone cord.
Yes.
What house in 2024 has a phone with a telephone cord? Anyway, especially when they got the TVs coming up out of the platform like those. No. But anyway, we have talked for 45 minutes about ANORA. I don't want to keep us here all night, but I also do not want to give short shrift to The Substance, the second movie on our double feature. Let's see. Katie, you're a huge advocate for The Substance, so if you'll take it from me, I'm going to bestow on you the honor of telling us about The Substance.
So The Substance, let me just pull it up a little bit. Stars Demi Moore as Elisabeth Sparkle, who is, as the IMDb calls it, a fading celebrity, which... but I like, in the beginning of the film, it starts out with her star on the Walk of Fame, which it also implies that she got that when she was very young, which that's not how that works. That's not how that works at all. But whatever. It also then shows the cracks in the star as, her star is fading. She has, won some awards. She's made a name for herself. And then she's been on this television network doing sort of exercise videos, sort of like a Jane Fonda kind of thing. And basically when she reaches her birthday age, the network that I would say she probably kept working or kept going basically fires her with no grievance, just that she's older and they're looking for a new thing, and here's a book and thanks for coming. And Dennis Quaid plays the producer, and wow, is that he gets the D in Dennis for this character. Let me tell you, I could possibly even, it's a long shot, but I could possibly see him getting some award recognition for this. So, Elisabeth is frustrated. Like, she's, a beautiful woman. She's vibrant, and she's done all of this for this company. And it's her birthday, and she gets fired, and she also gets in a car wreck. And when she's in the car wreck, she goes to the hospital, and a nurse gives her a card saying, you should call this number, and it's with The Substance, and it's like, find a newer you, or something like that. And she calls, she does this thing where she injects herself, and then out of her comes Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, Sue basically is now they share a life. 1 week is Elisabeth, the next week is Sue. But the thing with The Substance is that you are one. They are not two separate entities. You are one. You need to respect each other, because this is your bodies. You have to work together. And I love the fact that it did that. I know there are a number of people. Well, wait, let me keep going. Sue ends up getting the job that Elisabeth was fired from right away. She's like, I can only work every other week, and they're like, that's fine, whatever you want to do, and stuff like that. And then when Elisabeth awakens back up from her slumber, because each time they trade off, they're asleep for a week, she sees that there's already a billboard of Sue. Everything that she had accomplished has been taken over. And it was one of those things though that I was confused about because I didn't really, I mean, I didn't understand like what actually Elisabeth gets from this. I understand that with the substance, it's supposed to be one of those things, like it's supposed to be, you know, the newer you. So I kind of thought that maybe it would do one of those things like she herself would become younger and then have to, but I trade off. But I never really understood what Elisabeth necessarily gets from this. But I love the fact that it really does look at the absurdity of beauty standards in everything in Hollywood. And also that, I mean, I know 11-year-olds and 10-year-olds who have skin routines right now. I mean, it's just so I mean, I just don't get it. It's like it's still a perpetual thing that it's like stay young, do this, do that, all that. And I mean, you know, everyone's always looking for the next best thing, but it's the level of respect between the two when they face off again, not face off, but when they go back and forth, that's the thing that it's like that lack of respect that makes the animosity between them. I know I've talked to a number of people who think that was necessarily jealousy, and I was like, no, I don't think it's jealousy. It's like when Sue's awake and she sees what Elisabeth has done, she just sees an imprint in a chair looking at the television and nothing else. So she's like, ugh, rolls her eye. But then when Elisabeth comes awake, she sees that this beautiful apartment that she has made for herself, covered in trash and stuff. And it's like, and it's not, again, it's not jealousy. It's that lack of respect. And that's one of the things that the substance, like you are one, you have to work with each other. But when that does not happen and Sue decides to take this a little bit longer, let's get those Oscar nominations for practical effects and makeup, because once we find out what happens, that Elisabeth stuck a little bit longer than she necessarily supposed to, and I know we're doing spoilers, she comes out and she's fine that we see except for her finger. I wrote down, holy crap, give them everything. Like just the finger was just like done. That was amazing. The practical effects in this movie are just out of this world. But I also loved like the different nods to different horror films and different films in general, like The Shining and The Thing, and God, there's so many. There's like 10.
There's a lot of the Twilight Zone in this movie.
There's Twilight Zone too.
A lot of Rod Serling.
Yeah.
There's Elephant Man. There's just so many different things. But it also says a lot about, you know, people who work for a company for so long and then are just completely disregarded. I mean, one of the things about Elisabeth, it's like in the film that's beautifully shot. I think I love the cinematography myself. She walks down this hall of the studio that she's been working out for 20 something years, and they have floor to ceiling framed photos of her, like all these years that she's worked. And those are immediately taken down once she's fired. And you see two, like as the film progresses, you see two shots of Sue. To me, though, I was looking at that. It's like, look at what she has built. She's the one who's built this company. No one else is on those walls. It's only her. And she's just disregarded like nothing. That she gets a cookbook for working there for 25 years. And it's very interesting too to see like that Elisabeth's character she like looks at the newspaper. She has a paper calendar. She gets a cookbook, all these like, you know, analog items that are very old fashioned, but I mean, I still use a lot of that. But I mean, it's probably my number one film of the year. I hope that it gets nominated for different things. I don't know if it's going to win, but I just think it's just such a unique look at, I don't know, a very common, sorry, I'm just spacing out right now. Chemo brain. I just really just lost my train of thought.
No, I'm there with you. I wanted to like this movie a lot more than I did, and I think part of it is it feels more like an allegory or a fable than a movie I'm supposed to identify with and connect with. I could very well see this being up for Oscar and people talking about a serious contender because of that lovely Hollywood hypocrisy. Like, oh, this is a movie that annihilates beauty standards and really comments on things. Are we going to do anything to change it? Hell no.
Hey, Ian,
but-
watch that swearing, will you?
Hey. H is
I know.
allowed.
Okay.
But H, what am I, 90? Okay, so I will say, yeah, kudos to the effects team. I mean, this movie, I think, really comes alive. I felt the way I felt about the substance, the way Mark felt about the middle stretch of ANORA, honestly, because I feel like Coralie Fargeat, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her name. She did a wonderful movie from a few years ago called Revenge, which I think is a much better movie than this. Says a lot of the same things without actually coming out and saying it. It's still over the top. It's still overly sexual, very graphically violent, but kind of turning that exploitative element on its ear. Whereas this, I didn't think any of it made any damn sense. It felt like, an outsider who's never been to America talking about how Hollywood works. It's kind of like someone who's never been to Chicago thinking it's all about pizza and Al Capone.
And wait, it's not.
Sorry,
and
Mark,
the Bears.
I didn't mean
the
to.
Bears. You missed.
Oh,
the
that's
Bears.
right. Sorry, Mark. I feel like you feel seen. But no, like, okay, let's just start off with in a network that's built and sustained from an aerobicized show. Maybe if this movie is set 30 years ago, sure. But also Jane Fonda, all these people who made it big in the 80s in these aerobicized tapes. That's not what they did to become famous. They were famous, and then they did that as kind of a side venture. When she gets fired, especially because this is 2024, there's no such thing now as an aging TV personality who doesn't have anywhere else to go. She doesn't have a manager in this movie. It's all just her. And you called him the producer, this guy Harvey. Yeah. Oh, do you see that? It's the social commentary right there on the nose. He's the sleazebag. I think he's the head of the network because he keeps talking about the shares. He keeps talking about the investors. At the end, he brings that entourage in. But and that hallway with all the pictures of her, I'm like, I don't believe any of this. This is not. It would be a commentary if it was grounded in something resembling reality for people who are somewhat media literate, and I just didn't buy it. I did like that synergy of, or I guess the motto of the substance, which you've called back to, Katie, about you are one. I was also a bit confused by, what does Elisabeth get out of it? In fact, I was trying to puzzle out something that bugged me about the plot of the movie, and you hit it on the head. Like, if she was inhabiting the Sue body this entire time, that would be one thing. But it's like, okay, you're able to create this alternate version yourself, but it's not really you. And they never really show that connection, that consciousness between them, because they're constantly waking up from each other and being upset until the very end when they hatch, I guess, a third version, which is an amalgam of all of them, which is crazy. I mean, I'm thinking about Screaming Mad George's effects from Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I'm thinking of Brundlefly. I'm thinking back to what Sam Raimi was doing with Ted Raimi as Henrietta in Evil Dead 2 back in '87. I mean, it's incredible stuff. And I think the only CGI that I could spot really in this movie was the eyeball replicating scene, which was, but I'm thinking that only because I don't see how you accomplish that practically. It didn't look digital, like fake. And then also the last scene, I know we're in spoiler territories, but something melts into something else, and you can clearly see that's a digital effect, but it's done exceptionally well, I think. So mad props to the props, mad props to the design and the creature work, and the acting I think is pretty solid. Although, again, Mark, this is where I blame you. We talked about Nurse 3D the other night, and watching The Substance, I kept saying, ladies, please put on some clothes. Like, I never need to see another ass again because I saw Margaret Qualley's, buttocks in my face for what felt like 20 minutes of the runtime. I'm like, it's great, but can we move it along? Do we have something more to say? Let's tighten up that screenplay a bit, and we can worry about the eye candy later. Annie, jump in here.
Yeah. On a positive note, I absolutely adored the practical effects. I am really over CGI being over relied on, and I think that the entire understanding, needing to depict this the fullest of the ability to really convince an audience who may not experience or resonate with the story being told, and kind of to sell that through this grotesque body horror that really does get under your skin and makes you want to crawl out of it. And in fact, I really did think that that was part of the storytelling. That was part of the messaging. As someone who, like Katie, knows children who have skincare routines and are very afraid of aging or not meeting beauty standards, and understanding that the different standards between Eastern and Western beauty do intersect based on thinness and appearance and desirability. I found it to be a very timely and relevant conversation. Not to say that we haven't been having these conversations before, but we're very easy to sidestep them and neglect them in the sense that is in reality. But I think using a medium such as fiction makes it all the more unignorable and kind of forces anyone from any walk of life to understand what a certain demographic has to live with, and how it hasn't gone away and how it's consistently persisted since the dawn of time. That it doesn't matter what you've done or what you accomplished. You have to look a certain way. You have to be a certain size. You have to fit someone else's vision in order to be successful. I really did appreciate the efforts taken, and like you were saying, if there was too much ass, go on Instagram, open your social media, go ahead and tell me that it's not just a substance thing. This is what is expected of women all the time, no matter who you are. This is, how we are, we're either too revealing, or we're too out there, and we're too ANORA, or we're too prude, or we're too buttoned up, and we're too Amish to go outside. And you can't satisfy anyone. And I think the substance is a great job of saying, what do you want from us? How do you want us to look? How do you want us to dress? Because if we do it one way that you want, it's too much and we're whores. And if another way, it's not enough and you need to show more skin.
Well, I appreciate that everything you're saying, Annie, but I kind of, given the hype around this movie and talk, it addresses beauty standards and all that other stuff. I kind of expected more of a conversation, because what you're giving me right now is more nuanced than anything that's in this movie. I mean, all it is like, you got to be hot, you got to be young, or else you're out. I've seen this movie 1,000 times minus the body horror, and I didn't get anything new. There was
I think the body horror really drives that conversation forward from a psychology standpoint, where we do. I don't know if you've experienced this, but dysmorphia is a very real illness.
Yes.
Body dysmorphia, eating disorders. This is real and it kills people. And I think the substance takes that and it elevates it one step further to where it's being depicted in these very obscene ways. But this is how some people view themselves. People, can't recognize their own bodies, their own faces, their own weight, their own being, because of how warped image has become. And I think taking that and exaggerating it to an extent. I see Petty's comment about the surrealness and exaggeration and violence and absurdity. This is just a further step on that conversation, where it might be exaggerated or violent or absurd for some, but for others, it's an everyday reality.
And what you were saying about body dysmorphia, I think the scene that really, when Demi Moore is looking at herself in the mirror and she's going to go on this date with a high school friend who's always seen her as someone beautiful, and she goes back and she redoes her makeup, and she goes back and she redoes her makeup, and then she takes it off. It's that her looking in the mirror and just not loving what she's looking at, and it's just that grotesqueness that she sees, that she just wants to, and then she doesn't even go out. I know people who have done that. I myself have looked at it. I don't know. For me, that was I connected with that scene, and that's that scene in the film that it's like, if Demi Moore gets nominated and she gets nominated, I feel like that's going to be the clip that everyone's going to see, because it's just so I don't know. I just thought that was a beautiful scene that Coralie captured, and it's just something that you really don't see in films. Like someone as gorgeous. I mean, Demi Moore is a beautiful woman, but this character is like seeing herself and just keeps going for like just the ugliness that she can't get out of her head. And that's I know it's a lot of people talk about the body horror aspect of it, but it is a lot about the body dysmorphia.
Well, right, but I think what I'm looking for is a bit of balance because again, everything that you guys are talking about, I can understand as being themes in this movie. I just think it's very ham-handed and predictable, right? What I'm looking for is a male character who's not a scumbag or kind of someone who's not, or kind of pathetic, just like a regular person, be that a guy or a girl, because I understand this is society's expectations and what women have to put up with to, meet a certain standard, but there are plenty of people out there who don't give a shit. And I feel like anytime this comes up in Hollywood entertainment, it's from that one perspective of we've got to measure up. We got to measure up to who, for what? A sleazy producer guy. Yeah, again, I've seen this movie 100 times. Where's the person who can accept her for who she is? I thought when she went out on that date that she would actually hit this again. This is the ANORA parallel. I thought this was going to go to a certain place, as Mark did with that story, but it ended up on that kind of all night bender to try and find Vanya, in the sense that she didn't go on the date. She ended up standing him up. And when she's like wiping the makeup and all that stuff, partially it's because this is the still from the movie, with her like smudging the, kind of squeezing her face to get the lipstick off. I knew it was coming. And I kept thinking about, are we going to get back to that guy, sitting at the table? Is he going to be in the picture again? No, because he's a plot point. He's not really a person, which I think a lot of the male characters in this movie, in fact, all of them, are disposable cartoons that in a way do the same disservice to, that perspective that the substance is railing against from the other gender. And that's, again, it's a movie that is exaggerated. It's trying to make a big social point. But when I'm sitting down with something for nearly 2.5 hours, I want a bit more well-roundedness. The fancy camera work and the special effects are all great. But at the end of it, I'm like, yeah, that's, I never need to think about this movie again, except how cool those effects were. Mike, jump in here.
It's funny. It was probably my favorite movie of the year. And it was mostly because,
what dethroned it? I got to know.
Well, I'll let you know when I have more of a definitive list to show everyone.
Hey, Kraven the Hunter is not out yet. We've established that.
I mean,
Kraven. Talking about Kraven.
Morbius too. Yeah, but no, it was when I saw that movie. It was definitely a movie that had me kind of clutching my pearls, and I don't usually do that a lot when I see films. I feel like I see that kind of stuff all the time, but it was a movie that you are right, Ian. It is simple, but I think it kind of wins in its simplicity. It might bash you over the head, but that's what good art does. Good art is meant to have you, question things and to challenge you. And this movie kind of feels like, in some ways, a fan film, but it's like the best fan film because it's got The Shining in it. It's got The Thing. It's got like David Cronenberg films, all that kind of stuff. But I remember when I saw the movie, I thought, wow, that's the craziest fucking movie I've seen this year. And it doesn't feel like it was crazy for the intention of just going balls to the wall insane. It's probably trying to get into the mindset of and I'm a guy, so I have no idea of from my perspective, but it probably gets into the mind of of a woman who has to be held up by certain standards, and it feels like, what if they went towards a downward spiral of self-loathing and deprecation? And that's sort of what the movie was about. It was about someone who tried to learn to love, who wanted to love herself but couldn't because the Harveys of the industry wouldn't allow that. And yeah, it might be simple, but it's extremely engaging, and although it copies from a lot of other things, it still feels like its own thing. So on those bases, I thought it was fantastic.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, I'll revisit this point, but just briefly, that was one of the things that really I think is a missed opportunity here. Is it really is just her and Harvey. There's no other support system, like nobody really around her. I mean, we see a production crew and some backup dancers or aerobicists, I guess, and then at the New Year's Eve celebration, which started at 9 p.m. and was in a small auditorium. Whatever. Again, someone who's never been to America. Yeah.
Look, okay,
No.
we this year, I started my New Year's party at like 7. We were.
Well, no, I'm talking about
I will
major.
totally sympathize because by 11:30 we're like, can we just say Happy New Year?
No, but Annie, I'm talking about a major network taking out billboards to put on. I get your point because I'm lucky if I can cross that 11 p.m. line. Like I'm watching the New York ball drop, and I'm like, okay, it's the new year. Like we still have another hour to go. Anyway, so yeah.
The one thing I think, can I just chime in? The one thing I think they missed a little bit of an opportunity on, and it seemed to start to go there. And I take and agree with all points of view on this because I think you can read it that way, even the criticisms. But the one person we haven't mentioned that this is really a parody of in many respects, and that is Robert Louis Stevenson. This is Jekyll and Hyde, and the whole idea that they're fighting for time as Sue or Elisabeth is Hyde wanting more time and Jekyll wanting to, subdue him. And by the end, it's the fight within, right? That's one of the things I think they make an interesting commentary that doesn't get nearly as much play because I think the main thoughts that Annie and Katie and everybody else has expressed are kind of there in the forefront. But I think there's something interesting, and maybe it's because Coralie has done this, where she's indicting women a little bit too, in the sense of, what's expected of them, and they fall victim to it. But that doesn't mean that they can't also be vicious and villainous as well. And by the time they go for the second or third round of the trade-off, they're starting to compete with each other and sort of screw over the other person in a way. And that's also very Rod Serling too, because the lesson is, this is your body, you are one, take care of it. And they don't, because they're selfish and they want more time and they like being younger, or she likes this time on, it's like, the mannequins that wanted to stay longer and walk around the store without having to be frozen in the one section of the women's clothing section in that Twilight Zone episode. But I thought that was interesting, where it becomes really kind of a battle within too, between the alter ego of Elisabeth and how much time that person gets to represent the original person. And they weren't very nice to each other about that either. In fact, they bring about a lot of their own destruction because of that, because they're cheating the rules and they've been very explicitly told what those rules are. So I think that's interesting too, that, not only is it a patriarchy that's forcing women to do this, but ultimately they become so much a victim of it, they too become villains. And they sort of continue the same wretched sort of villainy.
Well, I mean, Jeff makes a really good point here as well, because I don't know if this is just a me experience, but I don't want to speak on behalf of Katie, but girls are mean. Girls are really, and I'm all about women supporting women, but you have to have that symbiotic support. It can't just go one way, and girls can be really nasty, especially when it comes down to competing for attention and looks. And I don't know, Katie, if you felt this way, but like for my entire life, or in my adult years, from like my late teen years into my adult years, it's felt like a competition to outdress and outdo someone else. Just because of, again, going back to the social media standards and the expectations of women. I think that that's not just a patriarchal thing, but I think that women are continuously still looking at one another and trying to subtly one up them and silently compete. And it's never really outwardly discussed or spoken, but more of a feeling. Katie,
Well,
I don't agree.
I will say that, and I don't know about, and this actually is a question for the guys too. I will say that I know when I started doing film criticism and doing different things with horror, I have one of my true friends that I met. She is 20 years younger than me, but I had a number of gentlemen say it's like, that's your competition. And they would say that Annie is my competition. How many times of these guys on the panel have you ever heard another guy say that's your competition?
About another guy?
Yeah, like of you guys on the panel.
People have said this about us?
Yeah. Well, yeah. That it's
my
like
gosh.
it's like that this is my competition and stuff like that. Or
I've
this
always
one of my
viewed
best
you as
friends.
a peer
One of my
and a
best friends
mentor,
is like is my competition. It's like, and I had to correct them, and he has daughters, and I was like, one, don't ever say that to your daughter, that this is my friend. Like, I want her to achieve all these things. I don't consider her my competition. I consider her my colleague. I consider her my friend. I want her to do her best. I will do my best. Like, we help each other out. Don't try and like put that in my head, because it's like, that's bullshit. But that's what women are fed, like from day one, that it's like, that's your competition. And especially when we get older and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's such crap. But I mean, do you guys get told it's like this younger guy's your competition, or you guys are each other's competition when you do stuff?
No,
No,
I mean,
not directly.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the weird. No, I mean, that's the weird thing about being part of the patriarchy, is most of us don't notice or give a shit or understand the conversation that's going on, because like, oh, we got to compete so we can look, better than this person or that person. That is, I'm going to say 99% women, like y'all making this stuff up to conform to some kind of an expectation that you think that we have of you. We don't care. We're trying to get on with our day. If it comes down to, I want to see a girl in a bikini in a beer commercial, that's a personal preference. But if I meet someone on the street, I'm not going to be like, I can't talk to you because you're not, showing some skin. But that's Hollywood aside, like you've got, I feel like most of this conversation is driven by one city in one state in one country on the planet. And that is pretty much Hollywood USA and the poison that they've like put out into the replicated in the culture. Because day to day, no, we're our own competition. We're just trying to get ahead. And looks, I don't know.
Well, that's with your perspective. I've actually witnessed what Annie and Katie are talking about standards among men. Usually, it's among younger men, especially college men, what they're holding their standards to women to. I've seen it in this college town many times. I have seen the exact examples of the guys that have been portrayed in the substance.
Let me clarify, Mark. I'm talking about adults, like actual people who
college students are adults. They're over 18.
Okay, yes, they are over 18. I'm not going to go out and call them adults, because I've been an adult for twice as many years as most college kids, and I can say no, that's not it. But go ahead, Mark.
Well, I'm just saying that. And I get what you're saying, Ian, but at the same time, what Annie and Katie are saying as far as standards and what is an unspoken or spoken sometimes, unfortunately, standard for what a group of individuals, younger men, or even just men in general, even older men, I've heard them talk about it as well. The standards that they hold women to, that they say amongst each other, maybe not necessarily, of course, to a woman directly, but they say amongst each other, whatnot, any guy talk or not, I have heard those conversations. And one of the things I've seen complaints about is how the guys are portrayed in the substance. The thing is, it's being told from Elisabeth and Sue's perspective specifically. This is how they are seeing it. This is the exact opposite of ANORA, and maybe this is why the substance, I enjoyed it so much, is because this is more of my wheelhouse as far as bizarre and more more exaggerated worlds, and I like when I see points, especially films take points and put them right in front of the audience faces. It's not trying to be subtle at all. With this, so the guys, yes, are exaggerated in the substances, as a comment was made by Petty, but at the same time, one, it's being told from the perspective of our female characters, and two, in all honesty, as exaggerated it is, I have seen these people in regular life. I have heard conversations in cafes. I have heard conversations in hallways. I've reluctantly, and I should have probably spoke up, but I've been in groups where guys are talking like this, and I probably should have spoke up at some point or just walk. Usually I just walk away of how they perceive what a woman should be to them, and very superficial in many ways, unfortunately.
Well, let me ask you this, because I want to draw a distinction. Are you talking about the way that they are relating in public to women, or are you talking about what I'll deem as locker room talk, which, by the way, goes for both sexes? Because if you're trying to say like, oh, men talk about women and they objectify them and all that stuff, but women, we never talk about guys.
I never said
Abio book covers. I just want to get that distinction, because I will fully acknowledge that in private conversation, at parties and jokes, yeah, people say a lot of off-color things about a lot of different people, a lot of different subjects. I'm talking about dealing with people professionally and personally, the way that the interactions are portrayed in the substance, because it is all a cartoon, and I don't buy it for a second.
Well, it's supposed to start the conversations of showing the exaggerated angles of these topics to try to get you at least think about them. Unlike ANORA, where ANORA for me was too realistic of people to where I was just like, I'm sorry, I'm just annoyed by half these people for most of the day, because I'm like, this is too realistic. I'm not looking for reality in my entertainment or my film. I don't need to do that. I could go down the street, or I could go sit in downtown and see people, like ANORA. I like that they're using the exaggerated examples to at least to get you to think or have a conversation about what's going on and what type of people are out there. And again, it's the perspective this film is being told from. That's how it's being seen from our main characters. That's how these characters are being seen. It's how they felt. I mean, it's a toxic relationship between Elisabeth and Sue. Sue is the younger version of Elisabeth, and you ask why. I was trying to figure out exactly at first why she's hanging on. I'm like, one, it's kind of a toxic relationship, and two, she's trying to hang on to something, and she's being stubborn by not going anywhere. Elisabeth could give up. Elisabeth could just say screw this, at some point, but she doesn't, because
she does when it's way too late. I mean,
when it's way too late,
she does inject the termination fluid into Sue, and immediately takes it back.
At the beginning, though, when this is going on, she is paying a price because she realizes she is somewhat benefiting from Sue. So she's using that in a way to where she can at least continue some of the lifestyle that she wanted to carry on since she didn't have a job anymore. But as it goes on, yes, then she realizes too late, maybe I shouldn't have. I think not only does it talk about, I don't think that it's not just talking about, the main thing is image. And I enjoyed this film quite a bit. What I think is also being addressed here that I think it needs to be in the conversation is the ageism part. It's not just the looks, it's the ageism part, because what you have here is it's what Katie was mentioning, and what's been dropped by everybody else in this wonderful panel is respect. Demi Moore, Elisabeth is the older version. She's looking for respect from the younger generation of sorts. I'm giving you this opportunity. Please take care of this opportunity. And that's how she's getting it to Sue. And Sue's like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm a young person. I'm not going to listen to this old fart tell me how to live my life or control me. And so you have a clash of generations in this film as well. And it is addressing that, the substance, the person who created the substance is like, you do have to work together if you're going to live a cohesive and happy life. And you have both of them butting heads, two different generations, basically, essentially, butting heads with each other, saying, no, I want to do my own thing. I'm not under your thumb. And so I think that's another interesting perspective that it takes here. I totally get the criticism, but I guess for me, I liked the upfrontness. I liked the absurdity. I liked the exaggeration, the otherworldliness of this. I think for me, the only thing that I wish it would have done was been a little bit more of a period piece, in that we didn't have cell phones. Like, it was back more towards the 90s than in today's world. And the only reason I say that is because then everything else falls in place better. My son, my oldest son, who has become my movie buddy now, I'm sure people tire of me talking about my oldest son, but he goes to meet with me on movies and just about anything. And I didn't think he'd come with me on The Substance, but he went with me on The Substance. And he's like, what took him out was the fact they put it in modern times. You had you had smartphones and that. If it was set in the 90s, you didn't have quite the explosion of the internet, so you could get away with the different actresses. You could get away with someone not Googling at any time, hey, Sue has absolutely no background outside of when she showed up. You could buy into the TV stations a little more if it was in, say, the early 90s. And there was the aerobicized, there were certain shows that were holding up an entire channel or station or whatnot. There were a few shows, not maybe just one show, but there were a variety of shows that were holding it up. And I think the show part, yeah, it's not exactly believable, but, that's not the main point with the studio's practices itself. I think it's just...
And I get what you're saying, Mark. And I think, I think using some of that runtime to tighten up some of the things like you're saying about, like, where does Sue come from? Right. She is kind of her own creation. And that could have been, a plot point even. I think it's very weird at the end where the monster that comes out puts on the blue dress and then takes the blown up photograph of Demi Moore, tapes it to her face and draws lipstick on it. Then she goes to the New Year's party and security sees that I can understand it's dark and everything, but that's not Sue. That's very clearly Elisabeth. And he's like, oh, you're on. I'm like, no, she's not on. That's supposed to be the other person.
Yeah. But
again, it's just kind of, for as tight as a lot of the effects and the performances. Although I gotta say, when Demi Moore gets into the old crone makeup with the bald head, I couldn't stop thinking about Glenn Close in Hillbilly Elegy. Like, all she needed were those big dumb glasses, and she was a dead ringer.
I kept thinking about X.
I kept thinking about Dark Crystal.
The old lusty grandmother was killing the X-rated filmmakers in X. It was kind of a similar.
She should have survived,
type.
and then she should have survived, and then gone off to a farm, and that could be, Ty West's
there you go.
cinematic universe connection. All right, well,
crossover hit.
We're gonna
a crossover
hit, which in X is a cross. Okay, we are going to go to comments, and then we're gonna get out of here because it's a double feature. We're an hour and a half. I love hanging out with you all, but I'm tired, so tired. David Fowley, I don't know why you weren't on the show tonight, David. Touching grass or smoking grass? Touching grass or smoking grass? Yeah. I love it. Hattie is back. Hi, guys. The film is visually reminds of the best of Stanley Kubrick. The lunch scene alternate the repulsion of seeing Dennis Quaid eat, and the meticulous choice of colors is a feast for the senses. Very much so. Even one thing I haven't talked about is the sound. Oh my gosh, the sounds of when you hear what's going on inside the bodies, where it almost sounds like someone is struggling to get out, and there's also goo everywhere. It's beautiful. And when Sue loses an ear coming out of the dressing room, that was all kinds of distorted. I was watching this on my laptop thinking, I wish I had seen this in the theater. Not so much for the other stuff, because I think I would have puked in my popcorn, but that sound, wow.
You should have seen it in the theater. It was a great experience, let me tell you.
I will bet that if this thing gets the kind of nominations or attention that I'm thinking it will, they'll probably Neon will put it back in. Or no, this is Tubi, right? Or Mubi, one of the Ubies.
One of those, yeah.
Yeah, they'll make some kind of a resurgence, I'll bet. And at that point, I'll have to seriously consider that. Oh, can you imagine what the Substance popcorn bucket would look like? Anyway,
oh, I wish.
Yeah, that would have been,
neon green and like who knows, stuff coming out of it, like double face, like
yeah. Oh my gosh. Now I'm thinking, because I was thinking like one of the grotesque monster parts.
Well,
but
yeah.
Now I'm thinking about the instruction, like a syringe with the green stuff in it. Very, very
Like
Herbert West, very
a green Jello. I was gonna say like a reanimator green Jello shot.
Yeah.
yes,
Get a job in a sideshow.
yeah. You are one. Yeah.
You get one refill. All right. But the director does not know how to close the third act and chooses the easy way. Surreal exaggeration, violence, and absurdity. Film ends up lacking substance. Nice. I see that little winky smiley there. One of my favorite emojis, Petty. The Demi 2.0 is hotter than the Sahara at midday. You say the Sahara, you're talking about the Vegas casino? All right. The film presents the male characters in two types, bad or stupid, forgetting the third. The producers, nothing like asking the patriarchy for money to fight against the patriarchy. Ooh, that's getting meta. That toxic environment that Katie describes is very common with men in gyms. Maybe that's why. Look at me. Do I look like a guy at a gym? I can't speak to that nonsense. No, the ultimate thought this movie should leave us with
is... Can
is...
we go back to that one? As someone who has gone to an all-male gym for martial arts.
Okay.
I've witnessed the toxicity, and I put those guys in their place. It really depends on the guy. It really depends on the person.
You mean if you can flip him? Is that what you're saying?
I can. Yeah,
Okay.
on occasion. Depends on how much caffeine I've had going into the gym. But I've met some of the most nicest, accepting, lonely, depressed, and enthusiastic young men at this gym. And then I met some of the world's like most stereotypical dude bros that will follow you to your car. That happened to me. But yeah, so it really goes both ways, and I think it depends on the person and how they want to treat gym culture. Like this is a very small gym, a hole in the wall in a small Midwest downtown. So it drew in a big crowd. We had people driving hours to come and pop in and pick a few fights and then head on out. But also, a lot of people were there to focus on themselves. They weren't really there to pal around with the guys. So I think it really depends on the character of the person going into the gym and how they want to approach gym culture, not the overall rap that gym culture gets based on gender identity.
I'll just mention, yoga mat and Target dumbbells. They'll get the job done. Yeah. Lastly, no. Oh, Petty's saying bye, but before you say bye, before I say bye, Petty, the ultimate thought this movie should leave us with is Brad Pitt is a moron. Wait, what does Brad Pitt have to do with this? Did he produce this?
Yeah. Is it a Plan B? I don't think it's a Plan B production, is it?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I
Hold
don't
on.
think so.
Petty,
no.
if you're still here, I'm dying for some context here.
Movie, working title, Blacksmith, Metropolitan Films. It's not. I didn't write down Plan B, so I don't know what the
Blacksmith, is that
Sure.
Brad Pitt's other production company because it starts with a B?
I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll just have to let that one go, and I'm gonna let you go, all of you, Earth's Mightiest critics. Thank you for indulging me in a very well-rounded and wide-ranging conversation about two, very unique, I guess, for 2024 films. I mean, definitely the shot of adrenaline that I think award season needs. Whether or not, wait a second, hold on. Okay, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Again, what does that have to do with the substance? I'm missing something, Petty. Context. All right. But I will say, Yeah, I did enjoy this conversation. I think more than I enjoyed the movies themselves, but I was kind of surprised by my reaction to them.
He's talking about
The-
Margaret Qualley was in the Once Upon a Time in
Oh.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize her because she was wearing clothes.
Jesus.
Man, I'm telling you, like, there's too much flesh in this movie, and that's coming from me, guys. All right, so I will say, if you have a chance to watch these movies, check them out, form your own opinions, see what you think of our opinions here. If you agreed or disagreed, leave some comments down below. We would love to revisit them on a future show, because I don't think the conversation about these movies is over. Far from it. But this episode is just about over. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree. We have Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists. And Jeff, what's the book that you've got out? What's the name of that again? Plug it. Do you have it handy?
I can grab it, but where do I have it? I don't right now. It's in the other room. Sorry, that would probably. I'll show it next week. How about that?
Okay.
It's called The Show Goes On.
Lovely illustrations by you, and I'm going to put a link to that down below so people can
thank
go
you.
check it out. They have to. All
Yes.
right. Yes. Katie Glidewell of the Blonde in Front, aka the Buzzed in Front, and
Almost
then
got
Mark
the
the
blonde
movie.
back.
Looks good.
I see that. It's hard to tell because everyone's like these small little boxes on my screen. I'm
know.
able to see it better on the replay. Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler podcast, which is live every Monday night and which has been spoiling me on movies, as evidenced by this conversation, for half a decade now. And Annie Banks of the Mary Sue, and We Got This Covered. Thank you all so much. I'm going to let you get out of here. I appreciate you. I appreciate you, all the live viewers out there who've been popping in and out all evening. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and support all of Earth's Mightiest critics. Their information is down below. I'm losing my voice. So until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much, and take care. And take care. And take care.